fact, last Sunday, the general consensus on this show was that none of the four major professional team sports, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, and yes, even the NFL, will compete or complete their seasons in 2020. This is completely inaccurate and far from a fact, according to a good friend of mine who happens to be one of the hardest working and most knowledgeable men in sports broadcasting, the host of Straight Outta Vegas, heard nationally by over 1 million listeners every Saturday night on Fox Sports Radio. Bernie Fratto, first and foremost, Bernie, I know Saturdays are late nights for you, and I appreciate you being on, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me. And by the way, just to clarify, it becomes a semantical conversation because what you just said was, will they complete their seasons? And I can tell you, even in the throes of the baseball negotiations, if you want to call them that, they were more like a game of chicken and a test of wills. I talked to many insiders, said, we're going to start, we just hope we finish. So I can tell you, for all three major sports, we'll set football aside. We can talk about it at the end if we have time, but all systems go, although they can't make themselves bulletproof, but there are a lot of protocols in place to ensure that the seasons will at least start.
Yeah, I see that, Bernie, and that's why I said compete and then complete, because I was saying they're not even going to compete, and now it does seem as though they will compete. But I still wonder, like with hockey we talked about before the break, these players coming from all over the world, and even locally, they're not where they're going to be, and we still don't even know where the hubs are. So they have to come back, get tested, go through quarantine, and then actually have an NHL season. And we keep hearing more and more cases in every sport, whether it be with the administration people, the coaching staff, or the players. And I just don't see the numbers going down.
Well, let's give this some perspective. Take the NBA. 302 players tested last week, 16 tested positive. That's 5%. So that falls within the societal norms. For all the people who test, 95% don't have it. And the hospitalizations are being reduced, and the death count is way down. Of all the people who get it, 0.7% pass, unfortunately, now. And they don't really fall within the demographic of young major league athletes. The NHL is going to have the most rigorous daily testing protocol of the four sports. Every single night, those results are going to be obtained before they even leave their hotel rooms the next morning. And July 1st is Wednesday. They're not even going to be in camps till July 10th. You're going to see the hubs announced within the next week, and things are going to start to roll into action. They're still not going to play games probably till around August 7th is the earliest I heard. So the bottom line is they've got ample time to implement and go through the logistics of getting people in their various camps and bubbles or however you want to talk about it. Here's why I'm telling you for sure that they're going to give it every effort in the world. Take the NBA. They've got a little TV contract that for the playoffs alone will bring them $900 million. They've got to get to that playoff tournament. If the NBA leaves $900 million on the table, their econometric model and their CBA will be completely blown up. They'll have to start from scratch, and the salaries that the players have come to enjoy are going to go by the wayside. So they've got to give this an effort. Same with Major League Baseball. The owners are banking on that $787 million TV nest egg when the playoffs start after September 27th. They're going to carry 30-man rosters and a 60-man player pool. And if someone tests positive, there's no DL. They just quarantine for a few days till they're better and then come back when they're ready. So they're going to do the best they can to have safety protocols and safety nets. Again, you can't make yourself bulletproof, but at the same time, think about it, Brian. You mentioned the tests aren't going down. Well, why would they? We've had the perfect storm the past month. We had wall-to-wall, people packed like sardines on the streets of America for 3 weeks. Then you've got increased testing to the tune of about 500%. We're now doing 500,000 tests today in America. Everybody goes crazy about Texas. Well, they're doing 35,000 tests a day in the state of Texas alone. And then we've reopened, so there's more interaction between people. But having said all that, even though the positive cases are going up, the other two, what I think are more important statistics, have remained manageable.
He is Bernie Fratto. You can hear him every Saturday night at 11 o'clock, straight out of Vegas, the pregame show you always wanted. Bernie, such a great job with that show. I enjoy it tremendously. And real quickly back, with Major League Baseball, as you mentioned, and the revenue, and the big issue was, always the full prorated pay, which they finally agreed on, but 60 games in 66 days. Is that even possible?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, in a regular season, Brian, you play 162 games in 184 days. So it correlates. And one of the things I think that's going to help is everything's going to be regional. So you meld the AL West with the NL West and the NL Central with the AS Central and right on down the line. So if you're the California Angels, of those 60 games, you're going to play the four teams in your AL West division, Seattle, the four AL West teams in your division 10 times, and then the remaining people in your melded division 5 times. So you're never traveling out of your time zone. You're never going to have a flight that's probably more than 2 hours or 90 minutes, and that'll be few and far between. And I haven't seen the schedule, but I think there'll be a longer series as well. So that's very doable. And, unless, again, barring some unforeseen catastrophe that we can't predict, or too many rainouts or earthquakes or some other disaster, they should be able to do it. Shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Going to be very interesting. I think it's going to make for some exciting baseball for all of us. 60 games. One of the things I've been seeing, and I know you had Todd Dewey on your show last night, some of the prop bets that I've been seeing for baseball are kind of interesting, Bernie, and I'm sure you're all over those. And also, what are they doing with all the bets that were made beforehand? Are they going to honor the odds on long shots that were the tickets that were got before the pandemic for a 60-game season?
Well, yes and no. So here's the situation on that. For all of the props, player props, division props, season total win props and such that were made prior to the pandemic, those are going to be refunded. However, if you bet on the Dodgers to win the World Series or the Yankees prior to March, that's going to be honored because it's presumed they will crown a champion. So that will hold. And there's a new series of props, like you just mentioned, a couple of really cool ones, I think. The over-under for the most home runs, the home run champion, is 20. So if you think they'll hit more than 20, that's the over.
Love the over.
Most wins. Will any team have more than 39.5 wins for an over-under? By the way, in 1878, there was a 60-game season, and the Boston entrant had 41 wins. And I think in the next week you're going to see props like the first X amount of RBIs, X amount of pitching wins, X amount of stolen bases. But my favorite prop by far, and I think this one's going to get some real action, will somebody hit 400 into 2020? Right now, the yes is plus 800. Here's why I think that is such a good bet. Yes. It's not a lock, but it's good value for the money. Here's my point. Since Ted Williams hit 406 in 1941, there have been 23 players in Major League Baseball history that have hit 400 over any random 60-game stretch during the course of a season. So it can be done. Somebody can get hot. Now, in order to cash the bet, there has to be at least 186 plate appearances, right, including walks, sacrifice flies, all that. Less than that, you won't qualify for the bet. And as far as any other future action, 58 games will have to be played. But I think the door is also wide open for long shots like the Tampa Bay Rays, who were 22-1, now 17-1. Because of this odd, wacky, short season, they've got incredible depth and roster flexibility, a great bullpen, great starting pitchers. And so if someone gets hurt, something goes wrong, in their 60-player pool, they're going to be as deep as anybody out there. One final thing, the best analogy I can give for this season is to expect the unexpected in the sense that there really could be a long-shot team sneak through like the Chicago White Sox or the Texas Rangers or the Cincinnati Reds. And here's why. Let's pretend an amateur golfer played a professional golfer, but it was only a 4-hole match. Anything could happen in that 4-hole match. Bob Costas brags about the time he beat Tiger Woods once. On a par 3, 160 yards, he stuck his tee shot a foot from the pin, tapped it in for a birdie. Tiger had a par on the hole, so Costas beat him on that hole. In a short sample, you don't have the 162-game dog day when you got dog days of the season at the end. Players getting hurt, pull hamstrings, muscles, all that kind of stuff. And you don't have some of these younger teams that have a bunch of young stars that aren't used to playing a 162-game season. They've only got to navigate a 60-game season like college. So if you make it a short sample, the weaknesses that normally come to bear in a 162-game season aren't going to happen. I think you can expect the unexpected.
Again, Bernie Fratto, straight out of Vegas, Fox Sports Radio, nationally over 350 stations and 1 million listeners every Saturday night. You can check Bernie out right here on this station locally, Fox Sports Radio, 11 o'clock Saturday nights. Bernie, you said a lot there. I know the one question I was going to ask you, and you answered it, was how many at-bats, because I think it's, 502 at-bats for
plate appearances.
Yeah, for
remember,
plate appearances. No, you're right, plate appearances.
Yeah,
I got you. But and then 186. So does that correlate with the 60 games? Does that seem about right to you?
Yes, it does, because normally in a regular full-game season, it's 502 plate appearances to win a batting title, which is 3.1 times 162 games. You may not play 162 games, but as long as you have the requisite 502 plate appearances, you're eligible to win the batting title. This is similar in the Las Vegas prop. Will someone hit 400? You have to have 3.1 plate appearances propagated over 60 games, which comes out to a total of 186.
Makes perfect sense. And what a cool bet. And I really like the wager. Plus 800, I think, is great. And on the other end, I think the most overrated bet that people are talking about, the few people I've talked to, they like the Boston Red Sox. I think they're like 35 or 36 to 1. They have no pitching. Sale just had Tommy John surgery. That team has no staff. I think that's the biggest suckers bet on the board. And 36 to 1 is going to entice people to take it. What do you think of that the odds on that one, Bernie?
Yeah, I specifically talked about that same thing last night, Brian, on my show and on Arnie Spanier's show. They've actually fallen to 46 to 1. You can get the Sox at 46 to 1, but in addition to Chris Sale, they won't have. They've got a ragtag Fugazi starting pitching staff that consists of Eduardo Rodriguez, a completely banged-up Nathan Eovaldi, Colin McHugh, who gets injured every Tuesday, and they signed a free agent named Martin Perez. I don't know who he is, and a 29-year-old journeyman named Ryan Weber. There's your pitching staff in Boston. And how was your day?
Yeah, I was going to say, we just talked about one of the Korean teams, didn't we? Bernie, last thing, and I got to talk about, we won't have time to go over football and all that, but one thing I did hear yesterday you talk about on your show was about the Dak Prescott situation in Dallas and how much money he's commanding, which I think is ridiculous to try to ask for more money than a guy like Russell Wilson. It doesn't make sense to me. But the bone I had to pick with you is you talked about his backup, and you made him sound like the second coming, like another Nick Foles, and you compared him to Teddy Bridgewater, but you talked about his statistics, and I want to be fair, because statistically you just mentioned names, and when I hear these names mentioned with Andy Dalton, it makes me cringe, but you talked about statistics, 30,000 passing yards and other things, the company that he's in, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and Matty Ice Ryan. I understand statistically, but Bernie, Andy Dalton has not won a playoff game. I've won more money betting against this guy in the playoffs than probably any bet I've ever made. And is that on his team? Was that on his former coach? Or is it on the fact that he doesn't win in pressured situations?
Well, first of all, there are objective truths and there are personal feelings. Your personal feelings have crafted your argument. Andy Dalton, by NFL standards, has had a very successful career. No, he hasn't won. And, by the way, neither has Dak. And here's the stat you alluded to. Since 2011, Andy Dalton is one of just 6 quarterbacks to do this. 30,000 passing yards, 200 passing touchdowns, 70 wins. Now, you've already mentioned Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger, and you left one out, Tom Brady. That's not an accident. And I will tell you, I don't know what's going to happen with Dak. I do think there's tension between him and Jerry Jones. And he only wants a 3-year deal, and Cowboys wanted to lock him up for 4 or 5. Backup quarterbacks are huge. One of the things I talked about last night is that, 72 Miami Dolphins, the only undefeated team in history, did it with a backup quarterback, Earl Morrall. Yep. Carson Wentz went down a couple years ago, and Nick Foles stepped in. We don't know what the future holds. Hopefully Dak stays healthy, and hopefully Dak earns his money and everything comes out, because I think football's better when Dallas does well. It just is. They're polarizing. But make no mistake, Dalton is more than capable. He's going back to his hometown of Dallas. He took a little bit of a bad rap in Cincinnati. But let me tell you something. Cincinnati was not really a stellar franchise, but Andy Dalton did a better job than people give him credit for. Those stats don't grow on trees. Those are real stats.
Well, I agree, but there was nobody behind him for years, and Dak Prescott hasn't played nearly as long as Andy Dalton. If he had that kind of career, then we could judge him. I don't think Dak Prescott's worth the money, and you're right, he hasn't won either. But I've never been a big Andy Dalton fan, and you're right, it is a personal thing. But also, like I said, in the playoff games, I just haven't seen him step up. Could he do it in Dallas? It's his hometown. Why not? Bernie Fratto, again, straight out of Vegas every Saturday, 11 o'clock at night. Don't miss the show. And Bernie, I'll do this for you. If the bottom line is, if you want to learn about sports and in general, everything going on, and you want the actual facts, the statistics, there is nobody that's worked harder. And finally, Bernie, appreciate it as you've deserved to for a long time. Trust me, listen to this show if you like sports. You should be all over it like a hobo on a ham sandwich. That's for you, Bernie. I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining the show.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I appreciate people tuning in. The ratings have been very good for me, and I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary. And just one last thing about Andy Dalton, not to beat a dead horse. Look, he's not the second coming. He's not a savior. He's an insurance policy, but he's a damn good one. So we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Bernie. Appreciate you. We'll take a quick break. Again, that's Bernie Fratto straight out of Vegas. Catch him right here on Fox Sports Radio every Saturday at 11 o'clock. We'll be right back.